Natalie, your camera is sideways.
It's sideways?
Yep.
Okay.
Just letting you know.
I'm straight up and down, so let me see.
There you
Right
go.
now, is that
Now,
correct?
now you're right side. Now you're right side up.
Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
It'd still be a little topsy-turvy because it's on my phone, but yeah, thank you. Now, I don't see anybody else. Is that normal in the beginning, or should I put participants?
Yeah, everybody else's camera is off for just the moment.
Okay, I gotcha. Thanks.
Sure. You're not muted, so.
Hi, I see a phone number, 650. Can you let me know who you are?
Is it 276-8128?
No, it's 726.
Oh, okay.
And then Lauren texted me and she said she'll be about 10 minutes late, thereabout. So just FYI. If you don't want to wait for Lauren, I'm more than happy to fill in her position
Okay.
until she gets in.
Okay,
But up to you, obviously.
we haven't got a quorum yet either, do we?
I think we do. Let me
Do we?
check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, we don't. We need one more.
Okay. When we get that, then you go ahead with the roll call.
Okay. Who's this 415? Ron? I see a 415 phone number. If you can unmute yourself and identify yourself.
Good evening, Laura. It's Ron Sturgeon.
Excellent. And then one more time for the 650 number, if you could unmute yourself and identify yourself. They will remain a mystery. But I will rename them so not everyone knows their phone number. Unnamed. Oh, I think with Ron, we have a quorum. I think he makes 6. Let me double check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes.
Okay, well then the meeting comes to order. We'll have a roll
Right.
call.
7:03. Okay. One moment. Okay, this is Laura speaking. Let me turn on my camera. Good morning or good evening all. So roll call. Judith Humberg,
Yep, here.
BJ Burns,
Here?
Natalie Sayre,
Here.
Louis Fagoni, absent. Cynthia Duenas, absent. John Vars,
Here.
excellent. Bill Cook, I see him.
Bill?
Here.
Got you, Bill.
Bill.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
now we can.
Hello.
We got you, Bill. Peter Markey,
Yay.
absent for Peter Markey. Bob Marsh, absent. Ron Sturgeon.
Here.
Excellent. And then Lauren Silberman, absent for the moment, but she will come back hopefully. So we
Okay.
have a quorum.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Oh, and I see Louis here, so let me promote him.
All right, very good.
So for the record, Louis Fagoni has joined the meeting.
Peter's not there. I thought I heard him say something, but was it somebody else?
I think it was Ron.
Oh, okay. All right.
Peter might be that 726 number because he usually calls from his house phone.
Okay, I don't have them all memorized.
Do you have a way to unmute him on your end? Because maybe, because I don't know if he can unmute it on the house, on the landline. I don't know.
Someone just shared their screen.
I thought I heard it, so maybe I'm wrong.
It looks like Louis shared
Yeah.
his screen.
Louis, can you unshare your screen? One second.
There should be a button at the bottom of the screen.
Am I okay?
Yes.
Don't worry, we didn't see anything embarrassing.
Laura, we didn't do the bottom part of the roll call.
Oh, so sorry.
Okay.
Jim Howard, Natural Resource Conservation, absent. San Mateo County Agricultural Commissioner Corin Whittle.
Here.
Excellent. Farm Bureau Executive Director Jess Brown. Absent. UC Co-op Extension Rep Frank McPherson. Absent. So we have a quorum.
Very good. Thank
And
you.
Laura Richstone, sorry, San Mateo County Planning Staff here.
All right, very good. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, hope everybody's doing fine. If we get going here, and we got any oral communications from the public? They want to talk to them, say anything to the committee?
I see Jess Brown joined late, so I'm going to promote him. And I see no hands raised from the public.
Okay, then we'll move on to the committee members. Got anything to bring up?
And Cynthia joined late as well, so she's here.
Oh, okay, good. Very good. Okay, no one from the committee? Then we'll move on. Any update on the COVID-19? Anybody have any? Corin, do you have anything to tell us about, anything new or?
Nothing new. We do have some gloves and single-use surgical masks at our office in Half Moon Bay for any ag operations that need them.
Okay.
Just give us a call.
Very good. Thank you. All right, then if there's nothing else, we'll move into the discussion we had last meeting, continue on with the farm stands.
So I'm going to read that item into the record. So beginning of the regular agenda, item number 6, continued committee review of draft farm stand regulations. Planning staff is requesting input and feedback on these regulations. The guidelines were composed with input from the Agricultural Ombudsman, Environmental Health, and the Planning Department, and were previously discussed at the March 8th, 2021 and April 12th, 2021 AAC meetings.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I guess we can open up for discussion again and see if anybody's got anything to add to last meeting or any new ideas, concerns.
This is Audrey. I just want to confirm that everyone received the notes that I sent. I tried to just distill what I had heard over the last 2 meetings into like main bullet points, which I thought could be helpful in guiding this conversation, and highlighted some still unanswered questions.
We appreciate you doing that. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and I'll continue to do that for as long as this conversation goes on. I know it's hard to continue conversations when there's a month in between.
Right. Well, it's good to see it. You know, you discuss it and you don't realize what we went through, and then you see it on paper. It makes a difference. Gives you more time to think about these things.
Yeah, I received it. It looks good.
Yeah.
There's a couple of questions I had when we get to that point, but are you going to go down the litany of the notes, or is it just open?
I wasn't planning on it. I was hoping that that would just show you where it still seems like there's some further discussion and decision-making to be had. And I know that there were some points that came up where towards the end of last meeting around the parking lots and density credits and stuff, that it seemed like the conversation was cut a little short. So I will just leave it up to you guys to go through.
I had one question when it's appropriate regarding the source of produce sold at farm stands.
Go ahead.
Okay, so under that, under bullet point 2, under perspectives, should be products grown by producer, including from other fields where farm stand is not. I'm just wondering if we could change fields to parcels, because I think that might make it a little bit more clear, because a lot of farmers, especially now, have several parcels on their farm. And obviously, if the product's on different parcels, not just different fields, that'll make it more clear.
So this is just to clarify, this is the bullet point question to AAC. Should farm stands be limited to, oh, no, source of produce sold at farm stands, including other parcels? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, where it
Okay.
says, and it looks like a statement that it should be, but it's a note. So it says it should be a product grown by producer, including from other fields where farm stand is not. I think it might be appropriate to change fields to parcels,
Okay.
because it would be more accurate for
I've got that.
Okay, all right,
Thank
if you
you.
all agree, sure.
And I just want to note that for the record that Lauren Silverman has joined the meeting.
Oh, hi, Lauren. How you
Hi,
doing?
guys. Sorry I'm late.
It's all right. It's okay.
I was halfway up
Hey.
Montero Mountain when I got the reminder about the
Oh.
meeting.
All right, you made it. That's amazing.
A little sweaty, but made it.
All
Thanks
right,
for bearing with me.
no problem. Well, just discussing that about, different parcels and stuff. I think that we have to think about whatever produce you can sell, whatever it may be. Like, I think Bob brought up a good concern last time about, you just can't sell local grown products and make a go of it. There's just basics, and everybody would be doing the same thing, and you're not gonna succeed. Pretty soon you're gonna get disgusted and let it go. If you're able to bring in other produce or vegetables from other counties, I don't think it's a bad idea, because I see these farmers markets with people coming from 2 or 3, 4 counties from here, selling produce, flowers, whatever. So they're bringing them in, and you've got local that are trying to save agriculture. And if they could get other things to sell that's related to agricultural products, why not let them do it to save the agriculture that they're trying to produce and stay in business now? So whether it's one parcel or 2 parcels, I don't think that should have really too much to do with it. It should be just local and outside produce and vegetables. I think if you're going to succeed in having stands.
So the current, oh, sorry, Laura.
Oh, yeah. I was just maybe I'll let you speak first, because I think we're going to say the same thing.
The current regulations are that temporary farm stands sell product from San Mateo County, and permanent farm stands can sell produce. So that can be from outside of San Mateo County. So do you want to keep that system? Or are you suggesting that temporary farm stands would also be allowed to sell produce from outside of San Mateo County?
My own personal thing is, and I hope the committee will speak to this, is if you're a farmer and you're selling your own product and other products of agricultural, I don't think there should be any regulations on you. I think you should be welcome to do that, to try to promote agriculture in our county. And if it's peaches and pears or whatever it may be, besides your Brussels sprouts or garlic or whatever else we're growing here that helps sell it, I think that should be promoted and not restricted to help the local farmers. Because like I say, you've got farmers markets that are coming in here from other counties. Why can't the farmers markets here, or the stands, be able to do the same thing? I mean, we're not talking about a lot of stands, and I don't think we're talking a lot of potential stands. I think it's just to save what we have and try to promote it and keep the local agricultural going. And I'd like to hear some other people, opinions.
Oh, you guys can hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
As far as the certified farmers markets go, the intent of that is that so farmers, the consumer is buying direct from the grower. And so there's some issues in there that we actually go out and inspect those farms. And so the ones that are coming out from like Fresno County or whatever, they're inspected in their home county, and then they're selling there, and they're only allowed to sell for 2 other producers, and they have to be listed on their certified producer certificate. So there's a lot of rules that go along with the certified farmers market. So you just can't kind of sell whatever you want.
But what I'm saying, Corin, is a farmer comes from a county that has peaches and apricots. So he's going to come into here and he's going to sell those.
Yeah.
Why can't the local stands be able to handle that same item?
Well, they can. They just have to go through all the other business licensing protocols with California Department of Food and Ag. The certified farmers market kind of gives them some exemptions in there, so it makes it easier for the farmers to sell direct to the consumer instead of having kind of middlemen. Whereas if you're a farm stand, you could go buy produce at the produce market, right? And that could be from anywhere. It could be, from Southern California, it could be from Mexico. It could be anything. So kind of the certified farmers markets to kind of give that a little bit more like direct consumer from the farmer.
And you don't think that's happening in these farmers markets?
No, I mean, that's happening that's what the intent of the farmers market is.
But do you think that any of them are going to the produce market and buying it and going to these farmers markets?
There could be some, yeah, but we definitely regulate it and make sure that we're trying to catch them.
Yeah.
If they are. It is hard.
The only thing I'm concerned, I just hate to see our local farmers and stands be restricted just to what they have, like Bob was saying last meeting, be able to handle other items so it helps sell their own items.
It looks like they would be able to, though, under the permanent farm stand in these guidelines.
Yeah.
I see John has his hand raised.
John, go ahead. John?
Yeah, I would agree with BJ. I think that we discussed at one point, like, it should only come from the county or something, and that's more restrictive than the current rules for permanent. But what I would like to see, and maybe it's already adequately regulated within the current rules, but that whoever has this farm stand, yeah, they can go to the produce mart and bring in product from other counties, but they are also growing product on their own farm and trying to sell that as well. Just, I happen to own or rent a piece of land where you could grow something, but I don't really grow, or maybe I grow a little bit and I don't ever really try to sell it. and then I'm buying in other stuff and just selling it. And
Yeah.
I think Bob's a good example where he obviously has grown a lot of pumpkins there, among other things, and so some of the year very little product comes from him, but he certainly is actually farming and actually selling his own product. So I'd like to see that whatever we put in, if we modify the regulations in any way, that we encourage, people to actually be managing farm and producing on their farms, but making it so that it's not so restrictive that they can't try to make some money by doing what Bob's saying, by buying in the products that people actually want to purchase when they're driving up and down the coast.
And then a point of clarification, the current regs as they are enforced, no outside agriculture is allowed in farm stands. The proposed regulation in front of you is opening that up a little bit in the permanent farm stands. So just wanted to make that point.
Well, it just seems to me that, the local farmer that has a farm stand is getting punished. And the person that goes to the farmer's market, even from outside the county, is getting rewarded. And we're trying to save the local agriculture. I don't know, maybe I'm just taking it wrong, but that's the way I see it. I think it's a disadvantage to our local farmers.
And then Natalie's hand is raised.
Yeah, thank you. Regarding this then, okay, so under permanent farm stand regs, it says that a produce dealer's license issued by the SMCO, San Mateo County Ag Weights and Measures Department is required for anyone selling farm products grown outside of San Mateo County. So a produce dealer's license, what exactly does that entail to obtain one of those? Because I like the idea of opening up the regs. I think that's a really, really good idea. But what does that mean from the county standpoint? Does that mean then that the temporary farm stands have to get a produce dealer license, or would that negate having to do that at all? And is that even feasible? So can you tell me what the process is then between the two and kind of where that stands? Does that make sense?
Sure. It's going to be a tag team between me and Corin. I will say that the temporary farm stands, which are open for less than 9 months, would not, as the regulations are written now, would not sell produce outside of San Mateo County, and thus would not need that license. That license is only required when you sell produce outside of San Mateo County, and that's right now as proposed under the permanent farm stands. And then all
produce came from outside San Mateo County. Okay.
And then Corin can jump in.
Yeah. Actually, I sent an email to Laura and Audria about some corrections that I thought needed. Number one, we don't issue produce dealer's license. The California Department of Food and Agriculture is the one that issues it. And it's actually technically anybody that's selling something not of their own production needs a produce dealer's license.
Okay, so if you're selling of your own production and of somebody else's production that's outside of San Mateo County, like BJ's proposing, do you need to get that produce license or not?
Yes, technically you need to get a produce dealer's license if you're selling anything not of your own production. So even if it's in San Mateo County, because that is a state regulation, that's not a county. So the state gives you an exemption when you sell on your own property. You don't need to get the license, but that's only when you're selling your own product. So that's always been in place. Nothing's changed there.
Okay. So is it?
So I emailed Laura and Audria, and I don't know if we need to state that for the public about those two corrections. So the number one correction was that it's the California Department of Food and Ag that issues the produce dealer license, and the dealer license is needed for anybody that sells not of their own production.
Is that a big process to go through and costly?
I don't think so. It's online now. You can go on and get your dealer's license.
You
There's
know-
different ones, and we can help whoever with figuring out which license to apply for.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's feasible.
It's feasible. It's not, I don't think it's very expensive either, relatively to other things.
And that's what, for a season or renewable every year, or what's that going?
I don't know. I think I'm imagining a year because most of theirs is a year, but I'm not I don't know for sure.
And then what would you list, what you're gonna be bringing in? So,
Nope. It's very simple. It's just basically like a business license. You apply for it, you get it, and you don't have to write in. That's through the state though. That's not, that has nothing to do with planning's farm stand.
So one clarifying question I have is if, so I'm hearing from the group that farm stands there has to be active agriculture, that they have to sell a product that is being farmed on that property. And that they should also be allowed to sell product from other farmers in San Mateo County and also outside of San Mateo County.
right.
So one question I have then, and Laura and I had a lot of back and forth about this months ago, trying to think about this, is like, okay, so how much of the product has to be from that property or that producer who has the farm stand, and how much are they allowed to sell? Is that based on square footage, or like based on percentage of product, or based on only the months in which they don't have a product grown on that property to sell? Do you guys have any thoughts about that? Because otherwise they could have like a head of lettuce that they grew in their home garden and have like 99% of the stuff from the San Francisco produce market. So there's, how do you design like a threshold that is not, that allows for that sale of other product, but also maintains the intent of what this is about, which is to sell product grown within San Mateo County and on that property?
Well, I think one thing is that, most everything is seasonal. So if you're, possibly lettuce would be different because you could bring it out of the Salinas Valley for months. But, say it was peaches and apricots, it's only going to be for a short time and it's over with. And then, you're into something else. It's not going to be, 9 months. So I don't think anybody's going to be selling an enormous amount. It's just a way to help have variety to sell what you're growing, as well as trying to, sell other stuff as well. But you're more than trying to promote your own stuff and possibly grow other things that find that there's a need for, and possibly we can grow it here.
And I had one other clarifying question that BJ, you just reminded me of, is that, farmers markets, certified farmers markets are about, so they're not within that county, but it's, I believe, local produce, that there's some definition of local. And so is that something that matters? Like, is it, should product be sold grown in Chile, or should it be California grown, or should it be local within, I think that's typically like 400 miles or something like that?
Yeah, I think personally, my own thing, it should be local and California grown. I don't think we should be using imports to keep our fruit or vegetable stands going. I think it's a seasonal thing. And if it was 400-mile radius, I think that's quite a range that you would get a pretty good variety of produce, and I think would possibly work. At least the options there. That's the thing. Maybe people don't want to do it, But that option should be there because we're limited to what we grow here on the coast. And you got 5 stands that are all growing the same thing. There's not much for the public to pick from or incentive to come to the fruit stand after a while, or the vegetable stand. It's all the same. You go to one and that's it. But different, stands would probably have different items, and hopefully that would satisfy the public more and help the farmer keep going.
Lauren has her hand raised.
And then I think Natalie's after me. I was just gonna jump back and offer some clarification because I'm a government applications person. I just pulled up the produce dealer's license and I know there were some questions. It looks like a pretty simple form. It's 4 pages. The fees are based on your expected annual revenue and are all kind of less than $500. And it seems like a pretty, for the way government application goes, it's pretty mellow one. And it does seem to last annually, just to offer that clarification. And then just on this last point we're talking about, I think if we're going to lift some of the existing regulation, what's in the regulations as they are today, with the limits that it has to be grown from your own farm or whatnot, I really like the idea of limiting it to California. If we think about, within 400 miles, that will incorporate some of Oregon and some of Nevada. So I'd be interested from the farmers here if that makes a difference, but I like the idea of promoting California ag. And then also, this has already been said a couple times, but I agree with encouraging farmers to grow from their own farm. So provide their own produce and have that in addition, if they want to supplement that, cool, but they should have to produce some of their own produce.
Well,
And I
this should
think
be
Natalie's
legitimate.
next. Yeah, exactly. I agree. And I think Natalie's next, and then Bill had his hand up after that.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Thanks. So I just wanted to, I was going to say the same thing BJ said about it. A lot of the crops are seasonal. So I would propose that no regulation be imposed on how much crop needs to be the landowner in the stand. It absolutely should not have any regulation, because if somebody has a seasonal crop and that's all they're growing, and they turn around and they get a produce dealer's license, which sounds like it's feasible, it's not going to really be worth it, although it's not that much money and it sounds easy, but it's just not worth it to pursue it if in fact, you always have to have your crop in there, but your crop is a seasonal crop, so it's not always going to be there. So I think that there should be no regulation on that. I think that's really important. And then as far as the question about going Washington and Oregon, I would propose that be included for crops that are limited in their ability to be grown here, because there's a lot of soils here that you can that you really are limited on how much you can grow. And so people do bring stuff in from other states, especially Washington and Oregon. It's a thought if it can be worded appropriately. So that's all on that.
Who's next? Thank you.
Bill?
Bill Cook, and then Laura, you had your hand up.
Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so,
You're not coming in very clear.
well, good information from everybody.
You're cutting up, Bill.
Can you hear me okay?
No, you're cutting up.
Can you guys hear me?
There we can.
Oh,
You might want to try turning off your video, Bill, and just having audio. It might help with the bandwidth.
okay, let's see if I can do that. Sure. Stop video.
Go ahead.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's a really interesting conversation around, what if somebody grows, basically nothing but, a few things and says, well, I fit in because of that. And it seems like that's something we probably want to protect against. And I think Natalie also makes a very good point that some people may have, a crop that they specialize in and it's only in part of the year. So the rest of the year, they're not going to be able to have, a significant amount of their own produce in their stand. So I'm just wondering that, we want to promote what is on that farm. So maybe it's over the course of the year, they, 50% or something of the stuff is from their own farm. I don't know. I'm just kind of kicking around ideas on it. But I agree with what BJ and John and Natalie and pretty much everybody has said is all important points, I think. I also saw something in the regulations that talked about foraged produce and that it doesn't qualify. And I wanted to know, does somebody know anything about that? Because I'm a big fan of foraging, native natural stuff that's already here and having that be an aspect of our agriculture. So if anybody knows about that, I'd appreciate some info. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else?
Laura?
Yes.
Laura?
So bringing my planner perspective, 'cause that's why I'm here, and just things for you to keep in mind. So I'm a land use planner, and that means tying an activity to a land parcel. So a large question is, if you do not require agriculture on an ag piece of land, but you allow a produce stand, how does that tie back to agriculture in the county if, there's no requirement that any agriculture be on the land? So that's the larger question that needs to be problem solved, at least from my perspective.
I think that I was hearing that agriculture does have to be on the land.
I was hearing both. And
Well,
like, to what extent is, I think, something you need to, or we need to come up with a threshold. Because as a planner, how do I implement this? How do I find that metric? How is it fair to everyone? As opposed
I could clarify for you if you want.
No, I'm going to go through. So that's one. These are just
Okay.
my questions.
Okay.
And then what's, I think, along those same lines, what's to stop a majority of the farm stands to have, for a majority of the year, to have produce from Yolo County or Santa Cruz County? How does that promote local agriculture if you're bringing in mostly, or you can bring in mostly agriculture outside of the county? And then my second question was more for Corin. You were talking about farmers markets and how other growers, producers are allowed to sell at a certain stand, but that was limited to 2, right? So I want a clarification on that. And then if we want to go that route and be similar to farmers markets, or would it be fair to limit the other producers or growers that are at a farm stand to 2? So those are just my general thoughts and perspectives.
Okay.
Good thoughts. I had a clarifying thing that might help with this. Is when we talk about seasonal, Laura, we're not talking about, or at least I'm not, we're not talking about seasonal in terms of the crop itself. The crop grows year round in most of the crops we're talking about. We're just saying they're harvested seasonally. So you're not going to have them in the actual produce stand year round because they're harvested seasonally, but they are in effect using up the land as agriculture land year round. And hopefully that'll satisfy, the question about the ag land and being used for agriculture.
So is it for a metric, and I'm not sure if this makes sense, but is it a metric maybe is for 2 months out of the year, produce sold at a farm stand is majority from the parcel. I'm not sure how long that growing window is, like, like 50%, like, I just don't know how to implement these as a planner.
Sure. Well, I guess it depends on the different crop, like with
And that's-
Christmas trees, it's only 2 months out of the year, but I mean, I just know going in the grocery store to get pomegranates for one of the cows recently, they're not there, but they were there a couple of months ago. So I think, it's different with different crops, and maybe that's something we can dive into a little more because I think it will help farmers. But we just got to know that just because it's not sitting there in the produce stand doesn't mean the land's not being used for the agriculture crop, because it is. It's just not being harvested that time of year. So yeah, if maybe that'll help, if maybe the other people could talk about the other crops. If that makes sense.
I see Corin's hand up.
Well,
I think,
that-
oh, sorry, BJ.
Go ahead.
I think along the lines of like just explaining about the crops, for instance, someone can have hay and pumpkins that they grow, and that's only going to be harvested a couple times a year, and a short window really. And so you'd want to allow them to still be able to sell at other points in the year. I think especially if they got the permanent farm stand permit. Is that what it'd be? It's a permit, right? And then you were asking about, if we want to be like a farmer's market. I would say no, not if they got a produce dealer's license. They should be able to sell whatever they want. I don't know if you want to limit it, but
So
I
then
think
why
if
is
you
it
have
limited
a
to
dealer.
a farmer's market?
What was that?
Why is it limited to 2 at a farmer's market? What's the thought?
I think the thought is that it gives farmers more options to sell. If they can sell more than just their product at a farmer's market, but they all still have certified producer certificates, which means that an agricultural inspector goes out there and makes sure that they see that that produce is growing on that land, and it's all documented. So each farmer that sells their product has to have one of these certificates. They're not required to have a produce dealer's license.
Would they have to have this requirement if they sold it at a farm stand in San Mateo County, or do those requirements not exist because it's not technically a farmer's market?
Yeah, they don't need a certified producer certificate to sell at a farm stand. But they technically, if they're not growing their own stuff, they should have a produce dealer's license.
So just so I understand, so there's no state check to make sure that the farmer from wherever is actually growing on his land, whereas there is in the farm stand, or
we do. We check farm stands, and so we'll go there and check and make sure that they have a produce dealer. Typically they have produce dealer's license because they're typically selling stuff not of their own production. But if somebody was just selling stuff of their own production on the corner of the property on Highway 1, they'd be fine. They wouldn't need a produce dealer's license.
I think my question, and I'll be done with after this question, is there, for a farmer who's growing something outside of the county, it sounds like there is a check by the state to ensure that they're actually growing what they say they're growing if they sell it at a farmer's market.
Yes.
If we allow them to, and we open it up to farmers outside the county selling at farm stands, is there that same check? Or does that check only exist for farmers markets and does not exist for the farm stands we're thinking of? And do we care is a larger question.
They don't need a certified producer certificate. Sorry, I don't think I'm explaining this correctly, but they don't need if they're selling at a farm stand, let's say a farm stand in San Mateo County is buying produce from peaches from Fresno County. They do not need, those peaches from Fresno County do not need a certified producer certificate. Basically just that farmer here in San Mateo County needs to have a produce dealer's license to be able to sell their stuff. And we do periodically check that too.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
So I think that, number one, if you got a ranch or a farm and you don't have a spot for a farm stand, you should be able to have it on another parcel if you can to help sell your product. And as far as selling other things, I think you should be producing your own stuff and then bring the other stuff in and sell along with whatever you're growing for that season. Because I think what will happen is, we'll say that May is the time that they open up the stands in the county. And if they start selling other stuff and they do better with other stuff than they do their local, then first thing you know, they're not going to be growing too much anymore. They're going to be buying and selling it, and they'll just have a few rows of this and a few rows of that. It should be a legitimate agricultural operation that does the same thing every year, and then they fill in with outside stuff to help promote their product, but not
Yeah, so
promote the other product.
That's really hard, is like, how do you, like, it sounds like we're all in agreement that it should be supplemental, this product from elsewhere, but how do you control for that so that it doesn't just turn into a bunch of retail operations, like what you were just saying, BJ? So typically a policy would have some sort of metric associated with it, like, you know, like a percentage or some, like, I think what Laura was trying to get at is some certificate system or something to verify that there is a connection to the property or the producer, right? That it is still promoting San Mateo County agriculture. That's the point. And so what are the options there? Do you guys have any?
Well, I think myself, personally, I think it's like a 3 strikes and you're out. If you get caught and you do it and you continue doing it, you lose your license and you can't do it no more. You lose
Your dealer's license?
Yeah, you can't sell outside produce no more.
But the dealer's license is what enables you to sell outside produce. So it's what keeps you selling the produce from San Mateo County or from your property?
Well, I would imagine you'd have to set up some kind of percentage and they'd have to be checked.
What's a mouth, buddy?
What was that?
You aren't muted, John.
John, you had something?
So I think, so the draft regulations as they're written now, there's not a permit that's issued to a farm stand every year. There are guidelines. So follow these regulations. And if you're not, and someone calls in a violation, then we can check your compliance with these guidelines. There's not a permit we can issue and revoke. But of these guidelines, I want to put caution in putting the onus on the county to check these things every year. Because one, you're creating new regulation and oversight where there wasn't before. We don't check farm stands now. And then two, I don't know. Yeah, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, aren't we trying to recreate some new language and rules and regulations to have these farm stands?
Yeah. So right now, farm stands exist in the PAD and RMCZ regulations, and it just kind of says and it gives some rough guidelines on type of products that can be sold and size. These regulations are opening it up to be to allow more uses and products sold, and to be more clear about what's allowed, because the existing regulations aren't very precise. But so as the draft regulations are now, there's no permit that's issued. I don't know if you want a permit. So for a temporary farm stand, there's no permit. as the draft regulations are written. For the permanent farm stands, there will be a permit, there will be a PAD permit and a CDP because it's a permanent structure. So there's a permit there, but those permits are kind of one and done. They're issued once and then they go on. We don't reissue them every year. So, wanted to make those clarifications.
Are those permits appealable to the LCP or the coastal committee?
Depending on your location, some may be appealable, some may not. It's all depending on your location.
I think for reasons like that, we should try to focus on keeping the temporary farm stands and focusing on loosening those restrictions and adding, we can add a produce dealer's license if that's applicable, if it allows us to do things that are more loose in nature. But otherwise, we need to get away from getting into an area where we're restricting it more. And that's going to happen if we go into the permanent one where it's appealable to the coastal zone, which we know goes in 5-7 miles inland. So it really affects a lot of us.
I see Lauren's hand and then Bill.
Go ahead, Lauren.
I have a question. This may be for Commissioner Corin. Do we have any, what I'm thinking is I agree that I don't want to create another permit that we don't have, because that's going to be onerous to the farmers that already are dealing with so much. Is there some sort of, could we explore like a registration process? Like it's not an approval that you need to have to get a license or something, but you do need to register with the ag department so that there's at least some awareness of the temp farms, what's happening where, so that if issues are raised, like BJ was saying, there could be, the county will at least know where who's doing farm stands where. Would that be I don't know if there's something, if registration processes exist for other agricultural activities, or if it would be a new thing. And now I can hear myself rambling, but that was my idea. Instead of a permit, some sort of registration.
Typically registrations have some sort of legal backing, and they're, usually within those regulations gives my department the authority to follow up and revoke a registration if we find non-compliances or have some other type of enforcement action on them. I think maybe it might be helpful to kind of talk about, maybe Laura, how things permits are enforced, like with planning. I don't know, because these guidelines wouldn't necessarily be enforced by me. I mean, we would go in and frankly, even the produce dealer's license, I can't enforce it. Here in San Mateo County, agriculture can't enforce it. I have to then forward it to the state, is basically. We're just observing the situation, and then we would forward it on to the state and have them do follow-up. So I don't know, these guidelines, I think, are more for planning purposes. Correct, Laura?
Yeah, so as part of planning, we have in our floor, we have building and code compliance, and we work together. So these would be planning regulations, and regulations or guidelines, I should say, hold metrics that can be applied across the board, and that you can easily assess if you comply or don't comply with a metric. So in this case, because there's no permit, if someone comes to us, let's say for a temporary farm stand, someone comes to us and says, we want to do a temporary farm stand, I, as a planner, would hand them these regulations and walk them through the process and walk them through the standards and say, you don't need a permit as long as you follow these rules. And they would say, thank you. And they would leave and hopefully do their temporary farm stands. We would only come out and look at it again, because it didn't need a permit, if someone calls in code compliance and says, there's a farm stand that I don't think is following X, Y, and Z rules in the guidelines. that would be forwarded to co-compliance. Co-compliance would work with a member in planning, and they would go out to see if that facility complies with X, Y, and Z of the draft of the regulations. If they don't, then enforcement would then start. So that would be issuance of fines and fees, and if a notice of non-compliant, and if the property owner or operator does not comply, it's an eventual lien on the property. But we give ample time and work with property owners before we take that step. But that's the general how we would enforce something without a permit. For the permanent farm stands, it would be somewhat of a similar process. The difference is there would be a permit more than likely required for this type of use and structure because it would be permanent. So it would more than likely require some type of PAD permit and CDP. And those are permits that can be conditioned. So I can say, you get this permit, but you need to follow X, Y, and Z rules. And those conditions will live with that project, with that structure, until that structure is demolished or no longer used. So you're always held to those conditions and to the regulations. So we, as planners, have the opportunity to impose more conditions on a permit than exist in the regulations. And then the same enforcement process would be the same. Someone would call and say, we don't think they're complying with either one, the regulations, the farm stand regulations, or two, the conditions of approval. And then the county would go out, planning and code enforcement would go out and see if that was true or not, and do the same liens and fines, etc. So I hope that provided clarification.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I respectfully disagree with the way that the process goes, because if a person goes through a process and you have an agreement with them, 99% of the people going by don't know that agreement. So you're waiting for a neighbor or somebody that doesn't like what's going on to turn them in, where I think occasionally the county, either the planning department that puts out these permits, should check on them once in a while to see if they're doing what they agreed to do. And then there's kind of a feeling that, we better do it right, because the county's going to show up here and we're going to get ourselves in trouble. So they'll stick to somewhat what they agreed to. But if you're going to wait for somebody to stop the person by turning them in, that may never happen, and it'll get worse and worse and worse. And other people with stands, they see that, and it's kind of unfair.
Unfortunately,
but that's just my own opinion.
I don't have the power to change how that
No,
department.
I understand, but I mean, this is what I see what happens. And,
Yeah.
And it gets out of hand.
Noted.
Anyway, maybe we ought to move
I
on.
think we had Bill's hand up and Natalie's hand up for you.
Then we'll move on to more stuff here instead of, we're kind of stuck on one thing here. All right, go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah.
I think it was Bill next and then Natalie.
Okay, thank
Well, I thought you went. Okay, Bill, go ahead.
I think that's a really good point you made. Yeah, I think that's, BJ, what you just said really is the way things work on a practical basis out here. And so I think it's an important point you just made. I'm going to a little bit of a different topic, that we have, farmers, producers that are more remote and their properties are not suited for a temporary or permanent farm stand. And I'm wondering, how do we help these people to sell, I guess, at other temporary farm stands would be a way to do it. And what do we think about allowing a temporary farm stand on a parcel that does not produce, but would be, really aimed at trying to help those remote producers have some, a good place to sell directly to the public. I'm just pondering that. I don't have necessarily a strong opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
And
I agree with you. Some farmers don't have good locations, but if they could rent a spot from somebody that does to promote their own product and other things as well, produce wise, local, I think should be able to do it. Because
I think that was the intent of allowing for the sale of other product.
Here in, is it okay to go now? Here in item B of the temporary farm stands on the current regs, it says ag products from different farm operations and are located on different parcels in San Mateo County may be sold at temporary farm stand structures. Products sold are limited to value added and agricultural products grown produced or produce in San Mateo County as defined under produce above. So temporary farm stands, unless I'm reading that incorrectly, already allows for that. So I think that's good, right? And what we were talking about was
I agree with you,
opening that
Natalie.
up. Yeah. But we were thinking about opening it up, I think, to beyond San Mateo County. Go ahead, Bill. I'm sorry. What?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering about a parcel that may be, very marginal in what it can produce, but is a great location to be able to sell stuff.
Yeah.
And that somehow, we allow those to sell, have a temporary farm stand, but they're not maybe going to meet the criteria for producing enough of their own stuff there. So like BJ was saying, maybe the other farmer would rent a place on that parcel, and that would be set up. But I'm wondering if there's a way to sort of make this work without having it be, opening it up to people just kind of setting up stores on their parcel because it's zoned correctly.
Exactly. And I like what you said, Bill, when Bill said earlier, when he was trying to get some sort of measurement on it, something like 50% or something like that throughout the course of the year in that farm stand is sold with product from that particular farm that the stand sits. I think that's imperative that it be written something like that. So it's annual, since most farms products are seasonally harvested, albeit the crops in there all year, but the ability to take it out of the ground and put it into the stand is not annual. It's not there year round. So I think when we talk about measuring that, we need to use some of that language that Bill mentioned. I think it's imperative to do it that way. Otherwise, we're shooting the farmers in the foot and agriculture in the foot here.
Can I just repeat what I think I heard from you, just to make sure I got it right?
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Farms with farm stands, farmers with farm stands have to, that throughout the course of the year, 50% of their product should be from their operation.
Well, I don't know if it should be 50%. I don't know what the number should be. That was a number that Bill said. Maybe we could all think of a number that works together, but that whole idea that it needs to be a percentage of the product that comes from that particular farm needs to be sold in the stand. But then other things can be sold. And, if we need to quantify it, we could do it that way, but make it for the whole year, because it wouldn't make sense to do it just for part of it since so many crops are seasonal. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would be very curious to hear what you guys think about what that number should be. Can I offer another suggestion or thought? Lauren, what you were saying about registration, and then I heard, Corin, your response about that normally coming with some authority to have action. What if it's a registration with the Ag Advisory Committee, and that it's just like a form or something that is submitted every year that says what you intend to sell, and the Ag Advisory Committee has understanding of local product and could kind of be the gut check against that percentage.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in. I'm not sure how that makes me slightly uncomfortable. Regulations should not, in my mind, live with the committee. So it makes more sense if you want to go that route, that it would live with the planning department. You fill out a form, you submit it to the planning department, and then the planning department takes it to AAC. I've never seen a committee where you fill out something for the committee only. I don't know. I don't know how that would work.
I guess I just meant for the committee's review.
So in that case, it sounds like the farm stands would be similar to ag tourism permits, whether temporary or permanent, in which a small form would have to be filled out and reviewed by the AAC, is what you're saying, is what I think you're saying.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about enforcement of, these rules, it gets tricky. Because you definitely need the authority behind you to really make a difference and make a change to somebody that's doing something. So I don't know exactly how that would work, but maybe Laura, you're on to something with the ag tourism.
I mean, that's fine. Planning can more than definitely do that. I thought that the general scope was, let's streamline this as much as possible and
Make
not
it easier.
make it easier. And that would make it harder and added an additional step that does not exist now.
Mhm.
But if the committee wants those checks and balances and wants that review, then in my mind, that's kind of one of the only ways to get it, is to implement a step that doesn't exist now.
This is Lauren. I'm going to jump in. And then see John just raised his hand. Yeah, I think that's the rub. I think you just hit on the kind of rub is we want these rules to be followed, but without any sort of license or registration process, it's difficult to enforce anything. So I think that's really where we're digging in and kind of exploring solutions. One other thought I had, just in terms of when we were talking about the metric of 50%, whether it's 50 or 25 or whatever we come up with, I wonder if it should happen on the back end, like you need to issue a report of what you sold at the end of your season, as opposed to the beginning, like registering at the beginning. Because I wonder, and I like that, putting in that metric of some sort of baseline for San Mateo County produce, making sure that's included. But again, how do we make sure that's being followed without some sort of paper trail? And then that creates an extra step for the farmers. So I look forward to solving this problem together. And I think John was next, and then Natalie, you'll be.
Sorry, Laura.
Go ahead, John. John?
Yeah, I guess I just was gonna kind of echo what Lauren said, is that we're kind of running into an issue where we really want the farm stands to be an opportunity for agricultural producers and streamline it so it's not onerous, but we also want those agricultural producers to actually be making a good faith effort to produce and not just buying in everything that they sell. So it's a little bit of a conundrum.
Right.
I would say that, if you were to, like, for example, my particular operation is kind of unusual, and we're trying to produce as many different things as we can the entire year, and we go to the farmers market. We go to 5 farmers markets in the middle of the winter, and we don't sell anybody else's product, and we have something to sell. It's not, doesn't always look great, but we are producing. Somebody could choose to farm that way, but I don't necessarily want to say like, oh, you have to farm that way. It's not okay to just grow 2 or 3 things that you're good at that you produce at certain times of the year, and then you're selling other people's product the rest of the year. I would say that the 50% threshold might be really high for certain folks who actually have been doing this for years, because the peaches and the cherries sell, and they're not growing them, and they may be farming a large percentage of their land and growing what they can, but they're not necessarily even selling all of that through their farm stand. They might be marketing, say, beef another way or hay another way. So they're still, they're farming, but they're not selling everything they grow through a farm stand. So
Right.
I'm kind of, I like the idea of a threshold, but I'm wary of it because I feel like it might be, it might be too more restrictive than what folks who have already been doing this have actually been operating under.
Right. Thanks, John. I think possibly too, you got to restrict what you're selling out of the county. Maybe that's something we have to look at. That you don't get, overwhelmed with outside stuff and then, leave your own stuff go. That's the concern I have. Then the local stuff won't be grown.
And Natalie had her hand up.
Natalie,
That's a
and then
good-
we're going to move on.
That's a good point, actually. I just have two things. One is I really want to see if we could, as a committee, try to keep in mind the goal of making it easier to get the ag products to the public. We need to think of ways like bringing in other things at farm stands and making it easier for the producer, the grower that, does have a crop and it's seasonal and it helps them. We can't deviate from that goal. That needs to be a core goal here. And, the second part is I just want to respectfully disagree with the idea of reporting what's sold after, because we already do an annual, the ag department already has you do an annual crop report, so you're already you're already doing that. So doing more of the same, I think it's just going to deter a lot of farmers from doing this. And I don't want to lose sight of the main goal, which is, to promote it and to keep ag going, on the coast here. So that's
Just going to jump into that. Maybe we use the existing annual crop report to be the registration point here. Like if everyone already has to do that, could we add a section for farm stands of that? Just if you already have to do the report, just expand it with an extra section on farm stands instead of creating a whole new document that farmers have to deal with. Just a thought. And I think Bill has his hand up, and then BJ, I know you wanted to keep moving.
I want to move on if we can. Lauren, can you explain why there would be have to use up a density credit for a farm stand?
So we're still talking about it. And I put it in there because I'd rather you guys view the most restrictive possibility than us say, no, you don't need a density credit. And then we do the regulations and then pop this density credit in. So that's why it's there. But we're still having conversations. But the thought was that a permanent farm stand for year-round operation for potentially 40 years can be considered an intensification of use property, and thus may require a density credit, especially depending on what your permanent farm stand structure looks like. Do you have refrigerators? So we're still talking about that, but it ties back to intensification of use and how restrictive our density credits are anyway.
Right.
So that was
because I thought that, say you got a farmer that's leasing a piece of property and he wants to put a farm stand. I don't think his landlord's going to give up a density for him. That's going to be, that's stretching it. And
unfortunately, with opening up regulations, sometimes that makes other things more difficult. So it's a balance of net effect.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, my own personal opinion, taken out, because I think that's, you're either a farmer and you're farming and with a stand, and when you get done, you take the stand out. But to give up a density, I think that's asking a lot. I think that's just my own personal thing.
Yeah, nobody's going to do that. That's not gonna. It's gonna deter from farming on the coast. That'll never happen.
Yeah.
That'll
So I know it's not popular. When I bring the suggestions to Steve, I'll definitely let him know, and then he'll have conversations with the Coastal Commission and with our other planners of what the best route is. But
right, but also if you're okay saying it's not just that it's not popular, but also the consequences that will occur if something like that were to happen is that you're not going to have, and San Mateo County is not going to have any farm stands, or they're going to have very little people, and agriculture on the coast is going to diminish. And those are the consequences that'll happen. That's, it just, that's the concern.
I understand the consequences, but we still, so these are just guidelines. So we still have to follow the density credit regulations that are codified in the a PAD and RM and RMCZ.
Well, yeah,
So,
but it's not in temporary
let me
farms.
finish. So if reading those, we cannot accommodate a permanent structure without consuming a density credit, then there's nothing these guidelines can do. You would have to then amend those regulations. So we have to see if we can, if permanent farm stands do not consume a density credit. It's not that we want it to, it just, we have to look at the regulations as they stand.
Laura,
Okay.
Bill had his hand up. Sorry, we got to go by the process a little
Bill.
bit. Bill had his hand up and then John had his hand up. And if you'd like to speak after that,
Go ahead,
please raise
Bill.
your hand.
Bill, I think you're muted.
Bill, yeah, I can't hear you. I think you got one of those foreign computers or something. You haven't got American made there.
I stopped my video there and unmuted, so this should work now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
What I'm hearing a consensus is everybody's opinion is that none of us really want to have a density credit get used for any type of farm stand if we can avoid it at all. And that would be what we would want to get the message to the county, that if there's any way to accommodate that, understanding that there are rules and regulations that the county has to deal with and what wiggle room there is within them. We want them to use all they possibly can to make it so we don't have to use a density credit for a permanent farm stand. And of course, yet alone, not a temporary one. I think, though, I'd like to just quickly say that I think that the annual ag report might be a good way to just say, if that producer produces enough to actually report on the ag report, that could demonstrate sort of compliance with their temporary farm stand, that they actually are producing in the county. And I think John made a very important point that a lot of people may produce stuff, but not actually sell it at their farm stand. And the farm stand is kind of ancillary to that, and a much smaller portion of it. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Next,
And we had
anybody?
John and then Audria. And
Go
then
ahead, John.
me after that.
Yeah, I guess I was just gonna say that it's possible that that obviously a density credit is worth a lot, and nobody's gonna choose to give that up to have a farm stand. But maybe what it would do is encourage you to have a temporary farm stand instead of a permanent one. In which case, we'd want to make might want to look at it if it's necessary that a permanent farm stand would require giving up a density credit, then we'd want to make the temporary farm stand to be a bit more expansive to allow for more to happen. And maybe that would be a compromise.
Thanks, John. Anyone else?
Audria and then Lauren.
Audria?
Yeah, I was gonna ask Laura about the density credit. Do we know if that is a requirement in any other coastal counties?
I'm not sure if other coastal counties no, to answer your question, but to expand further, I'm not sure if they use our density credits the way we use them as well. So it gets a little hard comparing regulations county to county.
Got it. Okay.
You don't match. And then Lauren.
I actually had the same point as John, which is that if permanent farm stands is a new structure that's going to require a density credit and PAD, then perhaps we can go back to to making the temporary farm stands more expansive, since that just the reality is that's what everyone will do because it's not feasible to use a density credit. So in that, just to drill down on that a little bit further, can we expand the operating time to like 11 months or like 11 and a half months so it's close to annual, or is that something in the PAD LCP stuff that we're stuck on?
I like that optimism.
The operating is in the PAD and I think the RMCZ.
I was worried you might say that, but thank you.
Okay. Anyone else in the committee? We haven't heard from too many other people. I'd like to hear some other thoughts on these stands, what you're thinking. We need to hear from different ones. Anybody else like to say anything?
Cynthia raised her hand.
Cynthia, go ahead.
Just a comment. I was actually a couple weekends ago driving through Gilroy and I specifically passed by one of those farm stands off the freeway. But I was kind of looking for local stuff. And it looks like it was a bigger than the road size, a smaller, maybe, I don't know, it's like a permanent one, like 1,000 square feet or something like that. But I was looking for, as someone who's driving through there, I'm local, but someone who's driving through who wants that like local stuff. I was like, well, why am I getting stuff from, there was asparagus from Mexico, there was grapes from Peru, and I'm like, I wanted local stuff because that's the point of dropping by right off the freeway there. So that's just from a consumer side, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Well, see, local you don't see anything is until May usually, and then from May until October, something like maybe into November, and that's it.
Maybe maybe certain things. I was looking for stuff that I know was grown more locally. I guess for me as someone who wanted to contribute, but yeah, maybe it was when I stopped by, but
they're just starting to come in now.
Maybe
the majority. I mean, right now.
Okay, it was just more for like a consumer. Anybody like passes by somewhere like touristy like that would like look for that thing, especially as a tourist. I think would want that kind of local but within county thing. I guess maybe it was the timing thing, but that was just my perspective from driving through one and stopping by. So that's it.
That's good. Thank you. Good.
That's all I have.
And Judy's got her hand up.
Judith?
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of with Cynthia in the sense of being a consumer, which is why I haven't really said a lot because I'm definitely not a professional in this area. But what I do believe is in supporting local agriculture and giving as many opportunities as possible for them to be able to supplement their income, which I think has come up in a number of comments by people. So local for me could, I don't know about the 400 miles versus California, but I guess I would prefer that it primarily be, or the majority of it be within San Mateo County, whether it's on the property or not, but also within California and definitely not imported from Mexico or, Wisconsin or wherever from the produce market. I mean, to me, that as a consumer, I don't go to a farm stand to get something that I can get at Safeway.
Right.
So that's kind of my whole mentality.
Right.
I want to support something local and more homegrown. And I suppose in this global world, local could be California. And I appreciate the 400 miles goes outside, if you go north, goes outside of the state of California, which I hadn't really thought of until I think it was Lauren said that. But for me, it's just, I really raise that regional food web kind of loyalty is really first and foremost for me. So however that we can support local agriculture getting stronger and having multiple sources of income that support growing on the parcels of land, hopefully where the stand is, no matter how long it's there, then that's what I would want to support.
Very good. That's good because people, I think, have gotten spoiled. They don't wait for seasons anymore. They want it all year round. And when you do that, you're not going to have local produce. And to have local produce, sometimes you got to wait before, especially in this county, it doesn't all come in at one time. It comes in throughout the summer. And also other places in California, it doesn't unless it's in the desert where it's probably all year round, but most places with the weather, it's controlled. So there's certain times of the year that you're gonna get your peaches or your apricots or cherries, but you're not gonna get them, in February and March. That's when the imports come, and then that's what we don't like to see really, but people are, they want it when they want it. That's what's happened today. And local is not considered, then that's the unfortunate part. Yeah, Judith, go ahead.
Yeah.
Cynthia, excuse me.
Yeah, I guess I just want to second kind of what you're saying and maybe just reiterate that, again, it's that going to a farmer's, if I think about my friends and even my neighborhood, because we talk a lot about, various choices for CSAs and organic fresh and imperfect produce and so forth. Now there's just so many options, but everybody does seem to, almost without exception, if they go to a farmer's market, they take the time to go to a farmer's market, or they take the time to go to a farm stand, they're really expecting more of a kind of, Cynthia alluded to this, wanting to vote and support local agriculture in some way that's more regional to where we live, and help those people have a better standard of living. And so I think, again, to have something that's so far afield that it's totally out of season, let them go to Safeway for it.
Yeah.
To me, that's it. That's just the bottom line.
Right. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, go ahead.
Cynthia had one more.
Kind of the same thing with Judith. It's like I support the CSA's boxes as much as I can. And the same thing, I know I'd like it to be within San Mateo County, but it's still local, regional. At least I'm supporting. I guess it's the same thing that I was thinking about last time when you said where we can have a farm stand that has a producer that is within San Mateo County, or maybe close enough where you can get some and you'll still buy it. That's the mentality I have when I buy a box from CSCA, and it's 4 or 5 farmers, because I know at least if I'm consciously spending likely more money, which I know why it is, then I'm going to also want to spread the money spread the money out in a one box that covers 5 or 6 farms, because I feel like I'm helping each one in a little way. So I think that's the same mentality with someone who might go to the farm stand that would be okay with buying, because it kind of spreads some money. You can go spend your dollars anywhere at the grocery store, or anywhere you want to buy the same produce, but if you want to intentionally do it, I think the thing with the farm stand, now that I think about it, it's okay, because you're kind of helping 4 or 5 stands or something like that. So I was thinking that, I thought of that last time, I just didn't, just dawned on me again. So
good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Lauren has her hand up.
I just wanted to ask, and I think we may be on the same page, BJ. I feel like we've kind of talked through section B quite a lot, the types of farm stands. And I wanted to see if anyone had any thoughts on section C, which are the performance standards.
Does anyone have any comments on C? We're not hearing too much tonight here.
Is C the farm stand size under types of farm stands? Is that the C you're referring to?
Like all the lighting regulations, parking hours that you're allowed, signage, all that kind of stuff on the last 2 pages.
Oh, okay.
Like I also want to
see.
make sure those aren't onerous for farmers at all.
What about the square footage of the farm stand? It seems kind of small. Does that allow for product to be placed outside of it, or is that the whole square footage has to encompass that amount of the product you're selling?
I think it's just the structure, right, Laura?
Yeah, it was just the structure.
Okay.
If you're outside, the thought was you bring it inside at the end of the day anyway.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, I mean, it seems small, but I mean, it is what it, I don't know. I mean, of course, ideally, I'd like it to be bigger for the farm stands that are not permanent, just to give more to the not permanent ones. But at the same time, I don't think that's a breaking point if you can also place stuff outside.
The 200 square feet is written in right now to the LCP, I think. And so if that was changed, that would require a larger effort to change the regulation.
Okay, so that would be an LCP issue, yeah. Okay, well, I think if you could put stuff outside, I mean, I think you have to pick and choose your battles, and that's good, that as long as you could put, you know, that you could put stuff outside.
I think Commissioner Corrin has her hand raised, and then I had something after her.
Go ahead, Corin. Corin?
Okay, had to unmute myself. One thing I was thinking about this San Mateo grown versus other county grown. What if we required signs to be put on the produce where it was grown? So that way the tourist that's coming through thinks they're stopping and buying something grown in San Mateo County could be educated if they wanted to by reading the sign in front of the produce.
That's a good idea, good compromise.
Because I definitely, I like both of your comments, because I do think that when people drive through and they stop at a farm stand, they are assuming that it's grown in the area. And it, you know, some people might not care, but I think a lot kind of want to get the locally grown stuff if they stop at a farm stand.
I want to be the devil's advocate here. So you put signs on it. Do you think that that's going to discourage the person from buying from you at all? Because you're supplement with other counties,
Oh,
and they see the sign there.
I
that
think
goes
it,
out,
I think,
this was local.
I mean, I personally think if they stop, they're probably going to buy something, but I don't know. I don't know.
I don't want to see the stand get punished because they are bringing something in from someplace else.
Well, I was thinking more of like signs like on the actual produce, like, you know, like if you're at the supermarket, it'll say, you know, what kind, this is charred. And sometimes it'll say USA. Sometimes it'll go, you know, more local. It'll tell you exactly what it is. So it's not necessarily like advertising signs, but like signs at it within the farm stand. Just a thought.
I'll jump in. Yeah, on to that and on both of your points there, I think we discussed that at a previous meeting. It's rare that a consumer has that level of interest. Like I am interested, like when I'm in the grocery store, I check, you know, where the produce was grown, but I know I'm an unusual consumer in that sense. Most people are just looking for what's fresh and what's cheap. So I don't think it would necessarily be a deterrent, because in my experience, most people aren't looking for that information, but those of us who are, it, like Cynthia was saying before, she was looking for the local produce. Like if I stop in a farm stand or even a grocery store, I go looking for what's local and seasonal, but not everyone does. I have something on the performance standards, but I want to let this part of the conversation kind of flow a little bit, so I'll circle back to that.
Okay. One thing I'd like to say is I think if it's from out of the country, I think it should be labeled, definitely, to let the public know that, you know, this is not in the state at all.
What about out of the state? Out of the country entirely, or out of California?
In other words, it's grown in Mexico, it's grown in, you know, wherever, other countries, and you're selling it. I think people should know that. Because I think there is there's a lot different standard from our local versus, you know, out of the country.
But if we're not, I thought the conversation was we would at minimum limit it to California. And if that's the case, then from what you're saying, there'd be no signs. So just wanted to bring that up.
No, I was just saying that someone said that should there be signs for stuff that's not grown here in the county? And I think it could be a deterrent. It would be a possible downfall for them to be selling their own stuff, because people would think, well, they don't really grow it here. Where if you're bringing it in from India, it should be labeled where it's coming from, or Mexico, because the standards are altogether different, in my opinion. And And then it's up to the individual buyer if they want to buy it or not, but at least they know. And I think in the stores, I think they're required to tell you where it's from. If it's, California grown or out of the country. I think that's been a standard for a while.
And then I want to say Natalie and then Judith had their hand up.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Okay, I actually, keep going. I think somebody actually said my point already, so I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay, it was Cynthia's next.
Judy, I think.
Or Judy, excuse me.
Oh, yeah, no, I would second, I guess I'm gonna go back and say the California grown to me, I don't think, I guess I would prefer that we keep it within California as opposed to even allowing stuff from Mexico and India. That to me is not a farm stand option. And then I just go back to sort of second what Lauren said, that I like the idea of labeling. Actually, I had thought of that before, and then I thought, oh my God, that would probably be an enforcement nightmare. But it's just the idea of a lot of the people I know, my friends, myself, I do care where it's come from. It does say something about the freshness of it, or at least I'm going to make inference about the freshness of it.
Correct.
So even saying the county that it was grown in is of value to me, although it won't be to everybody, and they'll just overlook it anyway.
Yeah. Well, it could be an option. I mean, that's, or whatever.
And then Lauren had her hand up.
Lauren?
Right. If there was nothing else on the produce signs, I just wanted to circle back to my note on the performance standards.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So under number 3, C3, something caught my attention. It says a building permit shall be required. The farm stand structure is larger than 120 square feet. Electrical or plumbing is required, and or the farm stand is in operation for 180 days or longer. 180 days, and maybe I'm doing the math wrong. Is that 9 months? Is that less than 9 months?
Yeah.
That's 6 months, I think, but we had under the temporary farm stands that a building permit isn't required and they can operate up to 9 months. So I'd like to see that consistent, that there's no building permit required for temp farm stands up to 9 months.
Right.
So
And this also is 120 square feet.
So to jump in, there's a distinction. So those are building regulations. So the 120, the electrical, the 180 days live in the building code. So you can have a temporary farm stand that will need a building permit, unfortunately. And we can't change the building code for that.
What do you mean? That's if you're building the structure, as opposed to if you already have the structure? It says, because what if you already have the structure? Is it the same thing?
I mean, if the structure was built legally with building permits to make sure it was built safely and soundly and is up to date on its electrical and won't be a safety hazard, then yes, you do not need another permit. If you are erecting a new structure such that you trip the needs for a building permit, the building regulations have said these are the thresholds and where we need to look at a building. And if you exceed these thresholds, then we need to do these safety checks, whatever they may be.
Okay, thank you.
Laura, this is Lou. What about these farm stands that are put on trailers? Do they require a permit?
That's a very interesting question. I'm not sure because it's not technically a building because it's on wheels. So I can't answer your question. It gets into the gray area of the building code. So I'm not sure how they regulate those things.
We may have found the path forward.
I mean, at minimum, I'll get clarification from building to see what those regulations would be, as opposed to baking in a gray area that may, create a safety issue for people visiting.
Okay.
Thanks, Lou. Anyone else? Well, I just want to make a comment. I think that, we all have good intentions here, but it just seems, and don't take this offensively, Lauren, but the county kind of blocks us one way or the other. And instead of simplifying this thing, it should be a lot better if we could try it and simplify this and then watch it and see what happens. But there's always a stumbling block when whatever direction you go in. It seems the county has something that we got to do that complicates it.
It was very hard to put these together.
No, I know.
There's so many overlapping things to consider.
I mean, you think this is a simple thing to do, but it gets more complicated as it goes on, you know?
And that is a product of living in California. We are a highly regulated land use state, unfortunately, kind of wherever you go. So, I mean, and that's why people move to California, because we are so regulated, because we have preserved what we want. And it does create issues for people trying to create permits. So it's finding that middle ground. So it's, there will be some onus like on producers to maybe apply for a permit, and that's a hassle. But on the flip side, we are opening up the regulations as well to the extent that we can. And the goal is to open them up, see how they operate, and then maybe bring them back. So you're not going to get something that you're 100% totally, excited about, but it's better than where you started from.
We need more moving to California to do agriculture. Make it help simplify this thing a little bit.
I see Natalie has her.
Natalie.
I just wanted to say briefly that in my opinion, the 9-month operating for a temporary farm stand is a very doable time frame for a temporary. I really, I've seen these regs before, but I just want to say, for what it's worth, I think that's a pretty good deal for the that part of it. Anyway, I just want to say that.
Thank you. Okay. Is there anything else on this we're going to discuss? If not, we might be able to get a shorter meeting tonight.
I just wanted to quickly run down the performance standards to see if you guys were okay. I know we've talked about the parking and how there is a desire to not have paved parking, and that's noted. But I wanted to talk about if you guys are okay with the hours of operation. Right now they're written from daily 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. So I wanted to get your feedback on that, or if that would create any issues.
Well, I think we've discussed that before about different stands starting a little later and not going late at night.
So yeah, to 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. do you think encompasses the most broad amount of stands that you think would occur, or do you think it's too restrictive? And if you do, what would your recommendations be?
Well, I think for farm stands, I think, people are not gonna, I don't think shop 8 o'clock at night, but these different activities that go on for pumpkin season seems to end up leading later at night on some operations, not all, but some. And that kind of, I think that's unfair to neighbors. I think, you gotta get along with your neighbor. And if there's noise and activities, I don't think agriculture should, be a burden to the neighbor.
So I agree. So the thought was 8 p.m. and maybe we'll break it up. Well, the thought was it's still light out in the summer at 8 p.m.
Yeah.
A warm summer night. So the thought was maybe people are out and about and want to stop at a farm stand. But to your point, in the winter, no one's going to be out there at 8 p.m. So maybe as it's written, it doesn't work. Maybe you want to split it up by season. During the summer it's 7 to 8, and during the winter it's whatever to whatever. Or do you want to keep it the way it is?
Yeah. That's up to the committee. They got suggestions, but
We got Bill and Judy have their hand up.
Okay, Bill. Bill?
What about something like, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, committee.
Yeah,
We can hear
How
you.
about something like dawn to,
you're
what
gone.
about something like dawn to dusk?
To me, Bill, it just seems to be too much. It gets late when you go to dusk. Because by the time the people, you know, especially at pumpkin season, if they got some big activities going on, by the time they leave, you know, it's pretty dark. I think that's just my opinion, but.
And
Judy's got her
Anyone else
hand
got
up.
any suggestions? Judith?
Yeah, I was going to suggest what Bill just suggested, which is kind of like how they do the beaches. I think they say they close at sunset or something. I don't know about dawn. That's kind of, it's really early. But I also respectfully understand what BJ is saying, that, you know, in the summer, that's going to be 8 o'clock, 8:30, 8:15. So I don't know. I in most farm stands I've been to, there doesn't seem to be a lot of noise, but a farm stand is different than, you know, what you see along 92, where there's, you know, the pumpkin stuff and the family stuff going on with the horse rides and all that stuff. So
Yeah. Well, my own feeling is, I think that you go from dusk to dusk, a person's not gonna stay out there all that time. I mean, I think 5, 6 o'clock, in my opinion, they're gonna wanna go home. And they're gonna wanna close. I don't think it's gonna be a late night for people buying produce.
Only if you're stuck in traffic
Yeah.
next to a farm stand.
True.
But Natalie's got her hand up.
True. Okay, Natalie,
Up, you're muted.
we can't hear you. You're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so what I would say is just break it up where it's the noise we're worried about are activities. We're not worried about noise coming from a produce stand. So I would keep it at 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and just define it as for the produce stand, even though it's already for the produce stand, but have some language in there like not, but not, you know, but that doesn't include the various activities, you know, whereas they would have to stop earlier, you know, because yeah, on a summer night, people go home and they do want to stop, you know. I'd hate to take that away from the farmers, but at the same time, I agree with the noise component. So just separate the two with some sort of language.
Thank you. Anyone else?
BJ,
Yes.
this is for Laura. Has anybody polled the existing farm stands as far as their hours of operation?
No.
Well, why don't we?
I think one, we don't know where they all are. I don't. Two, I don't know if that is the best use of staff time. Honestly. And then three, I think you know, a general definition that encompasses most of them, or what you think most of them should be, is good enough, is adequate. But that's why.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'd be happy to ask if that is something you guys would like done.
What was that again now?
I'd be happy to ask if that's something that you guys
Oh.
would like.
Okay.
I think we should ask the existing ones what kind of hours that they're using right now, because they're the ones that are they know when the customer base is there.
Right. It's a good idea. Yeah.
All right. Well, more to come on hours. So moving on to signage, this was pulled from the LCP and the PAD. So not much wiggle room in changing the signage regulations. But if you guys have questions on them, let me know. Basically, the regulations say if you have a sign on a structure, it's not going to exceed the roof line of the structure. If it's attached to a structure, it's not going to project more than 4 feet from it. If you have a freestanding sign, it's not to exceed 8 feet in height. And no off-premises signs are permitted, meaning, you know, you have a sign for your operation, but you put your sign, you know, 300 feet off your property on someone else's property. That's prohibited. And then regulations of when to remove a sign, 10 days of the closure of the operation, and if it's abandoned. And then further regulations prohibiting lighting of signs or, you know, colored streamers on signs, etc. So those are the general sign regulations. And, you know, let me know if you have questions on those.
Well, isn't there different regulations on county roads and state roads?
Yeah, so so these are speaking to signs on properties. Signs in the right of way.
Okay, all right. Okay.
You gotta approach that DPW, either the state or the county, whoever that is.
Okay. No, on private property, okay, I see, yeah, I misunderstood you. Okay,
And then we're almost done with the performance standards. And then we had some health and safety performance.
I'm so sorry, Ron has his hand up, as well as a call-in user.
Ron.
Excuse me. On signage, I don't see any limit to the number in what's given here. I think there ought to be a limit in the number of signs. I don't. Well, they're just, enough is enough. I mean, I don't know whether the limit should be 2. I just think that you know, a dozen aren't too many. You know, a sign advertising any number of products separately should be prohibited. But that may be just my inner Lady Bird Johnson in me.
It's a fair point. In other zoning districts, there are limits to signs, either square footage and or the number of signs. That is not included here. So I would be interested to see what the committee thinks is appropriate. And I think it should be baked in somehow to the sign regulations.
Okay.
Well, Ron did just say he believes that 12 would be too many, so that might be a starting point.
All right.
I don't disagree.
Yeah.
And that might be a good question for the actual farm stand operators. If we're reaching out to them about hours of operation, we can also ask them how many signs do they feel they need to advertise.
Yeah.
I believe there's another call-in user with their hand up.
Someone else?
Okay, talking is permitted. I think you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, this is Peter. Can you hear me?
Yes, Peter.
Yeah, sorry about a head emergency there. So I just want to let you know I'm here.
We're getting ready to go home.
Yeah, I know. So anyways, so I'm here.
Thanks for making the effort to still call in. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Peter.
All right.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move on.
BJ.
Yep.
Louis. Laura, what is there a maximum of square footage size as far as the signs are concerned?
In the existing regulations, no. There are in other zoning districts, but that's not you guys.
Okay.
So how we regulate it now, if we see a sign as a planner, it's what's appropriate and proportional to your operation if we see a sign. So that gives planners a little more leeway on what they think is correct. And that's kind of how, if the regulations stay how they are, it would continue. What do planners think is appropriate and the middle ground? If you guys are okay with that, then leave it the way it is. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe put in some more regulations on the amount or square footage.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lou. Okay. Well, again, I might like to see, I think Laura, you said, ask the people that have the stands what they think, along with the hours, and get some kind of a feedback from that to see how we can decide how to do that.
Excellent. And then the last performance measure is health and safety. So just a quick run through. Food prep is prohibited at farm stands with the exception of samples. So if you're selling value-added goods, you can't be making whatever that product is at your farm stand. That has to happen somewhere else. If you are doing food samples, then you need to have environmental health approved hand washing and toilet facilities for employees or those handling those food products. A limit of 50 square feet of sales area for pre-packaged food products like water bottles or soft drinks. And no live animals like birds are allowed within 20 feet of an area where food is stored for health and safety reasons. A performance standard for all garbage to be cleaned up at the end of the day and thrown away. And then finally, for all prepackaged processed foods to be stored in a vermin-proof area or container approved by environmental health. So let me know if you have any questions on those standards, and we'll go from there.
So now the environmental health comes out and inspects that before you start, is that so they know that you have proper food containers and whatever it may be?
Yes. You'll need some oversight from environmental health for food and safety to make sure your patrons don't get sick.
So they do that now?
Yeah, if there are food samples proposed out of place, there is a check.
Okay. Good. All
What
right.
about for prepackaged food products? They do that now for prepackaged as well regarding item F.
They would look at the area that you're storing your prepackaged food to make sure that it's mouse and rat proof, essentially.
Okay.
All right. Okay, anyone else have any concerns or questions on this? Okay, then we'll move on to community development.
Well, I had a question before we move on. I kind of wanted to get the committee's view on the chart at the end of the draft.
Okay.
It was a mind bender trying to make a chart, and it makes sense to me, but that's not its purpose. It's to make sense to all people. So I wanted to make sure that it made sense to the committee as a whole, how it's broken up, or if you think there should be changes.
Oh, I see, okay.
This is Lauren jumping in. From my mind, I've been looking at it as kind of a quick reference guide during our conversations, and it's been very helpful as kind of a quick reference for all of the information that we were just talking through and referencing. So from my mind, or from my perspective, you solved the puzzle, the mind bender puzzle here. This makes sense.
Thank you for going through that, Lauren, and doing that.
Yeah, this is Judy. I would say the same thing. I did use it. The bullet points and stuff were great, but I'm like, oh my God, I need a bigger view. And the chart really helped me. So.
And Audrey helped a lot with this chart as well. Wanted to give a
Great.
shout out.
Well, thank you both.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. Natalie has her hand up.
Thank you.
I like this chart, but I do have a question. Where it says, so it has the PAD district on the top and the RMZ and so forth, and the permits required. So it says that a CDX permit is required, and then it goes down to temporary farm stands. Is it, and this is probably operational error on my part, so I apologize, but is it saying that you need a CDX if you're having a temporary farm stand, because that goes underneath that, or am I totally reading it wrong? I'm sorry.
No, yeah. Yes. So if you do development in the coastal zone, you would send, for very simplified, you either need a coastal development permit, the full CDP, or a coastal development exemption. More than likely, the temporary farm stands would fall under the exemption if it's in the coastal area. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, okay, so whether it's temporary or permanent, you would still need that exemption, the CDX. You would still have to do that.
Yes.
Okay, I got you. All right, thank you.
Okay, anything else?
I'll just, thanks everyone for your discussion again, and I'll modify the notes and send them out again, just to kind of keep track of what everything, or what everyone has discussed.
Good, appreciate that, thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Does the committee want these regulations to come back to them? Or do you just want county staff to hear what the farm stands operators have to say about signage and hours and incorporate that into the regulations?
What's the committee prefer?
This is Lauren jumping in. Honestly, if we are approaching farm stand operators, if we're already approaching, I would love to get their opinions on what we've drafted and discussed kind of broadly, not just specifically. I mean, maybe with call outs on hours and signage, but we've kind of drilled this down significantly. And I think the only time it would make sense to kind of bring this back is to consider input from farm stand operators.
So
One question.
I don't know what that means.
So two notes, yeah. And it's getting late, so my brain is getting fried. If we're already going to approach farm stand operators to ask their opinion about small parts of this, I would prefer we ask their opinion about all of it, is the first point. And I know that probably puts more work on your plate, Audria, to perhaps build a survey or just, have conversations with folks. But if we're already approaching,
I shared it with people who have approached me about farm stands or who have farm stands, and have heard some comments and encouraged them to come to these meetings to share their comments.
Okay, so may have already been done. And so then you're just circling back for more specifics, like on the hours and signage, it sounds like.
Well, now, who's going to do this and when is going to be done?
I will do this before the next Ag Advisory meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then to my other point on whether this should come back at all, I don't want to speak for everyone, but we're all very engaged in this and would love to see what the next version of this after input from, Steve and the whole team, the planning department team.
Yeah.
That wasn't quite my vision. My vision for these regulations was to compile the AAC's input, and then make a revised draft regulation and bring it to Steve and show him what was changed, why it was changed, and then also with notes of this is what they want changed and this is why I don't think it should be changed. And then have his input. I didn't want to go back and forth between the two because it would take forever to actually implement. But to be fair, what I can do is I can amend the regulations as they are before you today to incorporate the ideas of consensus that the committee has come to. I, as a planner, might not agree with all of them. So the final product will most likely not match that draft regulation, just giving you warning. So I don't know what's best for you guys. Let me know.
Okay, I appreciate kind of breakdown of how how you're working through this process. And I don't want to speak for anyone else here. My only thought is, I know we had the subcommittee on the Ag Advisory Guideline recommendations, and I want to make sure that the full committee is able to circle back and discuss those before like July and August, when we're going to start getting the permits for the next ag tourism season coming before the committee. So I do, just to throw it out to the whole committee, I'd want to make sure we carve out time the next couple meetings to address the Ag Advisory suggestions. Or not, we are the Ag Advisory, excuse me, the Ag Tourism Guideline suggestions we wanted to make.
And then I will say, when you guys do the ag tourism, it probably, whatever recommendations you have, probably will not be implemented for year 2021, but for year 2022. So just keep that in mind.
Bill's got his hand up.
Bill? Bill?
Oh, that's okay. I agree with Lauren.
So
I
you're
agree
gonna
with
have,
Lauren.
okay. Laura, you're gonna have input on this to give to Steve as well, right? On your agreement or disagreement?
So yeah, so I would amend, yes. So basically I make changes, I talk to my supervisor, and then we have a meeting with Steve going through the regulations and our thought processes and what the changes we recommend are. So there is a back and forth between the director and the department. And then the director will take those notes and ideas and talk to the Coastal Commission and see what their thoughts are as well.
Okay.
I got a question when I get a chance.
Go ahead, Peter.
First of all, sorry I got late, something happened. But anyways, one question I asked in the last meeting, Laura, that you were going to check on is that if you grew your own product on your own parcel and you sold it on your own property near the road, I says, do you need, and it's out of a little trailer or pickup, and then you just removed it at the end of the day when you closed, do you need a permit? And you said you were going to check on that. Did you check on that, Laura?
So that kind of circles back to a discussion we had earlier today of, do structures on wheels need building permits? I don't know. And then also, there, as the regulations are written now, or the draft regulations, there's not a permit issued for a temporary farm stand. If that operation happened every day for a year, I think planning might look at it as a permanent operation because you're doing that use every day. So that's a gray area that I don't know, would be discouraged, or maybe we should write some more language into the regulations to discourage that type of activity. I don't know.
It was always permitted by right before. That's why I asked. And I was talking season of like 9 months out of the year when you're growing your product, and that's why I was asking. It's just,
I mean,
like,
if that operation happens for 9 months out of the year, I would classify it as a temporary farm stand, and it met the 200 square feet, etc. If the use happened for longer, every day for a year, or exceeded the square footage, then as a planner, I would classify you as a permanent operation, if not a permanent structure.
And my question is temporary, and it's growing your own product. It used to be permissible by right. Is it still is or not?
It's still permissible by right. The temporary farm stands are still permissible by right, just less than 9 months, and regulations on the size.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll move on then. Thank you very much, Laura, for doing all this, explaining all. The next, I mean, on the next meeting will be the April minutes. You can take care of that at that time. That's one of the things.
Yes, I started a new job last month, so
Uh-oh.
I've been catching up a little bit, but I will have the subcommittee notes and the April and May minutes at the next, at the June meeting.
That's fine, that's fine. And there's nothing else going on, there's no permits coming up before us so far. There's nothing else that, is going on here, it looks like. Other than I see what, 160 square foot shed's gonna be put in the rear of a house in Half Moon Bay. Other than that, I guess there's nothing else. Okay. We'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much for everybody and the input you gave us tonight. And hopefully we can prevail in this and get this thing changed around a little bit. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.